Hi, I'm Sarah Calgill, along with Andrew Moran, Dave Patterson, Graham Noble, and John Klar. And this is the Conservative Five, an online TV news production of Liberty Nation News. On today's episode, a real rat baffler. The Iron Chef of word salads is back and sealing her public image in America's unhealthy salad bar. The Waltz and Vance factor are up next in the VP debate dialed up. And Israel is over handling Hezbollah with kid gloves in the Precipice of War. Finally, it's another quick fix to flex the brain in Just for Fun, Volume 57. All of this and more coming up in this edition of the Conservative Five. America was dialed in to watch Vice President Kamala Harris debate former President Donald Trump, and were surprised at the composure that Harris demonstrated, whether she answered a question or not. She did not ramble on, and she seemed, well, presidential, besides the fact that the moderators were carrying her water. But that Harris soon vanished. In her place, a word salad chopper, making no sense on the campaign trail towards Election Day. Can Harris keep the momentum after yet another bizarre interview talking about suburban lawn care and just being with Oprah Winfrey? We're going to turn to Graham to help us out and understand this weird salad phenomena.
Well, I think this election cycle obviously bears at least one resemblance to 2020, and that is, of course, the rampant Trump derangement syndrome, which manages to, it really is what saved Biden in 2020, and it may, I'm not sure that it's going to save Kamala Harris's campaign exactly, but it might do. But the reason why she is still afloat at all is simply this, the fact that half of the people in this country have been kind of indoctrinated into believing that Donald Trump is the Antichrist. Because if you look at it, I mean, her debate performance, I think a lot of people are giving her much more credit for that debate performance than she deserves. She didn't make any dreadful mistakes, and she mostly avoided word salads, but she didn't actually say anything of any substance. And I believe that kind of some polls that came out after that debate showed that she didn't really move the needle in her direction with her performance. If anything, perhaps Trump was a little out of sorts almost. And I think maybe that's what gave people the impression that Kamala did so well compared with Trump, as opposed to his normal self. The appearance on Oprah was so awful that I would say that in any other presidential campain in which her opponent's name wasn't Trump, that performance on Oprah would have ended it for her. She'd be done.
To just be.
It was just terrible. There was one point in that show where she actually did a monologue which lasted 2 minutes. 2 minutes. And during that monologue, she said absolutely nothing that made any sense. And just to give you one line, out of that monologue, she said, "Let's come together with the character that we are so proud of about who we are." And I'm going to tell you this for a fact, and this is not an opinion. It's not open to debate or dispute. This is a fact. That monologue was the worst 2 minutes of television since the Baird television first made its debut in the late 1920s. That is how bad it was.
We are an optimistic people.
It looked like Oprah was in pain. She was like, "God, shut up. Can we please move on?" I mean,
you could absolutely
how do you handle that?
You could absolutely tell that Oprah was thinking to herself, "Please make it stop. Please stop talking." And I think at least half of the audience, by the expressions on their faces, they felt the same way. It was just absolutely, I can't keep repeating myself. It was just absolutely dreadful. But, again, the one thing that's the one thing that, while polls are even showing, and we know that we can't rely on most of the polls very much, but the fact that the polls are even showing this is a close race suggests to me that, again, it's the animosity towards Trump that is keeping this completely ethereal campaign of hers afloat at all.
Dave, what are the odds she'll be sequestered, much like Biden, after that last interview?
Well, Sarah, first of all, I want to put what I'm going to say in context.
Oh,
I
no.
come from a middle-class family. All of my family were middle class. The maid was middle class. The chauffeur was middle class. The upstairs maid was middle class. Our cook was middle class. So I can identify with the plight of the middle class. To your question, though, the odds are 100 to 1 she'll be kept from the public and a curious press, if there is such a thing. While President Trump has had numerous press conferences, several lasting more than an hour and a half, Vice President Harris has had none. Her exposure to anything that looks like a probing question have shown her to be vapid, repetitious, with memorized bullet points and policies, that lack detail. And, how would they work? When asked questions, they have the political and national concern importance of what's your favorite color, and when you were in that spice shop, did you like the cinnamon or the nutmeg? And there are never any follow-up questions, Sarah. When she gets a question, she goes off on her own non sequitur explanations. If someone would just ask a follow-up like, well, why is that your favorite color? They'd have her stumped cold. Kamala Harris, after all is said and done, is simply a reflection of the Biden-Harris administration, and she will not rise above those failures.
I would like to point out that Dave has gone from calling the feckless and Biden administration now to the vapid Harris one. So I'm picking up on those catchphrases. Anyway, so Andrew, public image is everything. What kind of voter enjoys what Harris is selling? I don't even know what it is.
Before I just go on, I'd like to comment on a couple of things. So first, I disagree with Graham that she didn't make any dreadful mistakes. I think that if the debate moderators actually fact checked her in real time, then she would have made very, very dreadful mistakes known to the American people, like saying she was left with the worst unemployment rates since the Great Depression, or that there were no combat soldiers in war zones. Those are really terrible mistakes, but of course, nobody called her out on. And Dave reminded me of a time during the 2020 election when she went clothing shopping with the media. And that was disgraceful. It was disgusting. Now, onto your question, Sarah. I think there are three types of voters at play here. Let's go first at what the polling shows. I think let's go with the latest Monmouth University poll of Pennsylvania voters. This one shows those who support Kamala Harris are the ones who prioritize abortion as one of the top issues facing America. Many polls also support this. I think the second type of voter are the woke white men for Kamala individuals who want to appear feminist and joyful and woke and all this just hot garbage. And finally, Graham referenced this, those who just absolutely loathe Donald Trump and want anybody but him, even if they've had a disastrous past 4 years. So on the flip side, if you look at similar polling, let's go with the latest NBC News poll. It showed that those who prioritize immigration, economy, and the border are more likely to support Trump. So you have one class of voters who think abortion is a top issue, who go for Harris, and those who want a better economy support Trump. So those are the class of voters you have heading into November.
So, Andrew, are you seeing that white men of the United States of America are looking for a dominatrix?
I'm never going to die.
I don't know. I had to put that in there. That was the weirdest analogy. But anyway. Okay, so let's step aside after the voter here and let's say, John Clark, is Harris getting any keener on the issues?
It's a concept of a business, right?
Yes. I have no idea where I'm going with this. You know where I'm going with this because you wear a tie.
I don't like being last fiddle here after everything that our panel have said today. I feel like I understand what it feels like to be Kamala, not just to be middle class, but to have nothing but word salad coming out of me. I think she's very keen to be fuzzy and to stay away from the issues that are the death knell for them, because she's flip-flopped on so many issues in an effort to now do what? Reach the middle. And I think the debate in many ways turned out to be a disaster for her and the Democrats, because a lot of Americans are looking at how biased it was and how it's sort of a reflection of this surreal world we live in which facts by Trump were fact checked as not true when they were true. And she lied repeatedly. So there's an ongoing conversation about what wasn't said, things that were said that were false. And this conversation is not of interest to those who already adulate her and will vote for her, even if she was a corpse, because they hate Donald Trump, as Graham has pointed out. And I'm not sure it was the worst 2 minutes in television history. I think there's a mesmerizing voyeurism in it for a lot of people. It was literally stunning, up there with Joe Biden not properly announcing the president of India. So these are just like this can't be real. This must have been AI, right? So I think what's also happening, what we're really talking about, is how this is going to impact the independent voters, a lot of whom we are seeing are young voters, are Black and inner city voters. They want to hear not any more of the charlatan cackling. They want to hear what you're actually going to do with policies on the ground that impact their wallets and their families. And so the controversy with ABC and a lot of these other things, her old clips, this debate has become an opportunity for pundits and critics to literally contrast all of her lies that ABC enabled and didn't fact check with actual things from her past. And it's a feeding frenzy on her, even before and without regard to Oprah, which every time she comes out, she comes across as an elitist, disconnected from the real issues. And aside from her word salad, the feel-good stuff doesn't work for people when they want to hear how you're going to bring down food prices, housing prices, and close the border. And those are the last things. That's deer in headlights for her. And that's when the word salad spews.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, Harris does address some of those. I mean, her proposals won't work, but, putting a ban on price gouging, apparently, and, want to build 3 million homes, which, of course, will not do. So she does present some public policy proposals. Whether they will succeed or not is questionable. And I will add the one thing that I think the worst 2 minutes of television is actually the Fonz trying to jump the shark in the Happy Days. I think maybe that was one of the worst moments of television.
Really? I like that show. Well, guys, America is faced with the daunting task of figuring out just what the Democratic nominee stands for and what her accomplishments from the past term actually are. Voters know Donald Trump, and early voting has begun. The battleground blitz is on and too close to call. Thanks, panel. October 1st will be the first real chance America gets to see and hear from the two running mates in election 2024, Tim Walz and J.D. Vance, a side-by-side glance of two starkly different ideologies and backstories. With a myriad of topics to discuss, military background, professional degrees, polar opposite thinking, this debate might shed more light than the Harris-Trump contest. Help us out here, John Clark. What do you think will be the strengths for both Walz and Vance?
Well, I'm not sure what strengths Mr. Walz has. I really haven't watched him speak as much as far as a speaker. J.D. Vance seems to be quite impressive from some coverage I've seen. But I think this might be an interesting microcosm of broader issues from Americans right now. Are they voting for a person or are they voting for policies? Because if you started to compare their relative strengths on policies, and once again, looking at the idea of the independent voters, polls are showing that Walz is turning off a lot of Democrats who do not see him as strong in handling issues like the border, handling issues like inflation. He doesn't really have a strong track record in that way. He's a teacher. He's a bureaucrat. He doesn't really represent the working class ideas that Kamala Harris is trying to espouse. And he doesn't seem like he is as good of a choice as Josh Shapiro would have been, especially beyond Pennsylvania, because the nation is looking at our future leadership and saying, which of these two people would we like to represent us in a particular circumstance? And it becomes inescapable for him to evade his policy record, which is very far left, 100% EV cars by 2040, abortion laws, social justice laws, shut down the police, free college for everybody. These are economic issues. So regardless of what the candidates themselves portray themselves as far as strong or weak, in which case I think J.D. Vance looks a little bit stronger, to the extent that counts, a lot of independent voters are going to be looking at that itself as a reflection of how strong they will be on policies when they're number two, and behind two candidates, one of whom is elderly. Donald Trump. Just if you look at actuarial tables, we may have our vice president become our president, and in Kamala Harris's case, similarly, we may end up with a Waltz presidency. So I think people are looking at them as very important number twos, and hopefully, I think for all of our sake, and whatever side of the aisle you're on, that they will look at policies. And in that department, I think Waltz has a lot more vulnerabilities and weaknesses than Josh Shapiro would have had for this Democratic Party.
Well, and you brought this up, so I'm going to run with it with Graham. In reality, do the VP candidates really impact who votes for president? Let's look at the past, Graham. I mean, got Bush in.
I would say, I'm sure a lot of people have different opinions on this, and it would be interesting to see if anyone's really looked in depth to see if there was any kind of correlations you could make between VP picks and the success or lack thereof of any previous presidential ticket. I would imagine that mostly the VP pick is not making a lot of difference. People are not voting for vice presidents; they're voting for presidents. And yes, okay, you often look, well, the vice president may be the guy or the woman who is up next, on the ticket in 4 years' time or in 8 years' time, depending on who's in. But I think by and large they don't. However, look at the two candidates we've got, the two presidential candidates. You've got Donald Trump, you've got Kamala Harris. I think possibly a lot of Democrats are chewing their nails right now, thinking about Kamala Harris as a presidential candidate, and they're probably less than impressed. So maybe some of them are thinking to themselves, okay, I need to know more about this Tim Walz character, because let's face it, I think outside of certain states, Tim Walz is not that well known. So I think people will be maybe tuning into this vice presidential debate thinking, I need to know more about Tim Walz. I already know about Kamala Harris, and I know that she basically is very thin on substance, let's say. But what's this Walz character like? Maybe he will give me more hope. And then on the other side, I think there are people who probably are going to vote for Trump, but maybe they're doing it holding their nose because they just don't like the guy. And so they may be looking at Vance, and especially because, Trump is in this position where, even if he wins, he's already served a term. If he wins, there is no running for re-election for him. So in that case, J.D. Vance is quite possibly the guy who's going to be running for president in 2028. So I think it's going to be kind of interesting debate. I would say that, yeah, Waltz is, I kind of agree with John. Waltz I don't think he's a very likable character. And he has actually done about faces on certain issues. And then, of course, everyone remembers that, Minneapolis burned to the ground on his watch kind of thing. And he pretty much cheered on the protesters almost. It is funny that he is actually trying to appeal to the average, working class guy now, the working Joe, where he did this video the other day where he was supposedly working on his truck and he was under the hood. And it was so silly because you saw he removed what obviously was a brand new air filter and then he put it back. And that was supposed to be him working on his
He's
truck.
a working class kind of guy.
It was just embarrassing, really. So he's trying to make himself out to be something he isn't.
Well, Andrew, does the press reporting any of his, what we might claim as weaknesses in the press, as the press in the press? I mean, Graham just pointed that out. So is the press running cover, or what are they doing here?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Well, running cover for the Harris-Waltz administration? Absolutely. Running cover for the Trump-Vance administration? Absolutely not. And you know what? But when it comes to J.D. Vance on that debate stage, his biggest weakness will be a Trump, of course, because the debate moderators will continually pivot to J6 to the previous election to the long list of court trials. And JD Vance is going to have to somehow balance, the positions he supports with, the stuff that Trump has done. And that's another thing too with JD Vance is that he's going to have to fend off not one candidate. He's going to have to fend off against three different people, the debate moderators and his opponent Waltz. He's going to have to do live fact checking because the debate moderators are not going to do that. So if Waltz starts talking about, inflation was already hitting 9% in January 2021, JD Vance got to point out these numbers. And it's going to be hard to do, of course, in a live debate setting, but hopefully that's the way he's going to come out of this thing alive and turn out to be the victor. But I'll say that he needs a Lloyd Benson moment. I don't know if anyone remembers from 88's VP debate, Lloyd Benson and Dan Quayle. And then Dan Quayle says, oh, he's like Jack Kennedy. And Lloyd Benson says, I will say that I served Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you know Jack Kennedy. And everyone went crazy. And then he's gonna Vance needs something like that to stand out.
Well, okay, I get that. But here's what I also wonder, and we're gonna call on Dave for this one. ABC was filleted by media for how they handled things and what they did and all the cover they were running and just everything. That it's just a really poor moderation of a very serious debate. CBS going to pull that same kind of stunt, or do you think they're going, oh, well, let's not do that and be in the news as the news?
My sense is that CBS will be more careful about how it's perceived. The CBS moderators are going to attempt to be objective inquisitors. And that will be hard because, they're no more nonpartisan than any of the conventional network media. With the debate moderated by CBS's managing editor, Nora O'Donnell, and Face the Nation's host, Margaret Brennan, you know that the questions are going to be focused on women's issues. And they're going to be all over Senator Vance on the abortion issue. And so he needs to be able to give a quick answer, bring the subject back to grocery store and gasoline pump answers. And, the real question is, will JD Vance run his own debate? Give a nod to answering the specific question, but come back with a statement of fact that puts Walz's radical positions in the spotlight. And in a fair debate, you wouldn't want to do this necessarily, but what we've seen from the lefty media, Vance should keep the moderators on the defensive, I think. Don't answer Walz's questions. He's not the moderator. Give the answers that Vance wants the voters to know about the Trump-Vance ticket and make it assertive, make it compelling. And again, this idea of it's very easy to fall into the trap of trying to answer the details of the moderator's questions, especially the ones they didn't ask.
But JD Vance, I've seen him in front of the press, and he like Ron DeSantis, he's quick on his feet and he's combative with the mainstream media. And like John, I've seen him in the Senate hearings, and he's good in the scripted environment. So whether he can maintain that momentum in front of the debate moderators, it should be fun to see.
I agree with you, Andrew. His repartee with Dana Bash was particularly impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, Trump said after his debate, he actually said that his biggest regret about that debate was that he did not kind of push back on the moderators for how they treated him. And he really should have. And I think that was a mistake on his part that he did not. I don't see that happening with Vance. If they do pull an ABC, and I kind of agree with you, Dave, that I don't think CBS is going to do that so much. They're going to try to at least kind of make it look as if they're being more fair, objective, impartial, if you like. I don't know how successful they'll be at that because that these people just can't help themselves. But I think they're going to give it a college try, as they say. But if they do just decide to go after Vance and keep kind of fact checking him and leave Waltz to say whatever he wants, I could see Vance actually directly confronting the moderators about that. and going after them. And I think he should.
I don't see Vance as even, trying to embellish anything. I think he will just stay on the mark. Go, Andrew. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say how, Trump did a horrible job in the debate, not pushing back, like Graham just said. I mean, just that the dog eating question itself, and the debate moderator said, "Oh, we reached out to the city manager," and Trump could have said, "What? That's it? That's all you did? You reached out to some bureaucrat? Oh, that's the definitive answer you need now, as opposed to speaking with the local Springfielders."
ABC News did reach out to the city manager there.
Yeah, that's right. As if any city manager is going to say, "Oh yes, oh yeah, there are people eating dogs. There are people eating domesticated cats in my town." Yeah,
or they're going to answer the phone at 11 o'clock at night when these people are fact checking. I mean,
Sarah, I do think there is one question that that Vance does need to spend some time thinking about, and that is, excuse me, but you said that you would allow Russia to keep all the land that it has acquired in its unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. Do you stick by that? That's going to be a tough one.
Oh, but Trump.
That's a good one.
Hey, when Graham says the old college try, these people didn't go to the old college. They went to the new college. And so everything is tainted with an ideology. And I think the half of the debate will be made, perhaps, as you suggest, about abortion, which I think just shows them to be tone deaf again. They should spend more time pretending to be mechanics with brand new air filters. And the other half of the debate, they're going to try to frame to be about Donald Trump. And I think a lot of Americans, and I'm hearing anecdotally, a lot of Democrats are starting to see through this. And the ABC debacle with whistleblowers now pointing out that they actually colluded with the Harris campaign. Yeah, I think CBS might want to walk on be very careful how it presents itself, because that makes people start to, I think a lot of Americans, they don't like foul play. The Democrats may not care, and maybe some on the right don't care, but I think a lot of people in the middle are going, wait a minute, that was foul play. What? Why? And start looking underneath, at the policies. And so again, I think also that's why this could be more impactful than traditionally VP debates are, because I think it's going to get at those policy issues.
Well, I'm gonna let that be sort of the last word, but I'm gonna also have the last word. And as CBS likes to say, the more you know. So tune in and make your own determination as to who brings the best opportunities for America. Thanks for watching. Thanks, panel. Since Israel stepped up its attacks on Hezbollah last week and over the weekend, talk of all-out war is buzzing. With the increase in frequency and intensity of cross-border exchanges, many fear the stage is set for a full-scale war in southern Lebanon. Israel is urging residents of southern Lebanon to get out of their homes and leave areas where Hezbollah has stored ammunitions, rockets, and missiles. The Biden administration, however, is not decisive and continues to ride the fence. Dave, is there a diplomatic way to resolve this, or have they gone too far?
Simple answer is no. Negotiating an end to violence with terrorists whose only tool to achieve its aims is violence, that's a fool's errand, and the United States has engaged in that far too long. Anthony Blinken's too numerous to count trips to the Middle East to try to bring, some sort of negotiated peace, they have been, for, want of a better term, total failures. There is no peace there because he's not dealing with people who actually want peace. Israel, on the other hand, is dealing with the problem of Hezbollah and Hamas in a way that the terrorist organizations actually understand. In other words, if you endanger the lives and property of Israeli citizens, we will kill you. And that's pretty impressive, actually, when you're the one being killed. Listening to the U.S. press, you get the idea that Hezbollah just got it into their heads to attack Israel with what is approaching 9,000 rockets since October 7th. Hezbollah has been attacking Israel routinely for decades. And the U.S. should be grateful for the elimination of Ibrahim Akil and Fuad Shukr. They've been sought by the U.S. for their roles in the truck bombings and the destruction of the U.S. Embassy in Beirut that killed 63 people, and the U.S. Marine barracks in 1983 that killed over 240 Marines. There was a $7 million reward for a kill that was put out by the United States. Let's face it, the Israelis did it for free. We should applaud that.
Well, Graham, what is stopping Israel from just obliterating Hezbollah, just till it's nothing but a parking lot?
I am hesitant to say that the Israelis actually could do that at all. It would take a massive effort on the part of Israel, and it wouldn't be anywhere near as relatively easy as it's been for them to move into the Gaza Strip and to take on Hamas. There's a huge difference between Hezbollah and Hamas. Hezbollah, for a start, practically runs southern Lebanon. They have thousands of fighters. They have stockpiles of ammunition and other ordnances. They have, I was going to say they have great communications networks, but maybe now not so much. But, as far as, they're a terrorist organization. There's no doubt about it. There's no point pretending they're anything else. But they're almost also kind of on a par with a modern national army. I mean, they really are very well organized. Could Israel absolutely wipe them out? I think it would take enormous effort, enormous amount of casualties on both sides, and enormous destruction done to the southern part of Lebanon. It's not so much a question of could Israel do it. It's would they want to, and would they think it was an expedient way of moving forward.
But I just don't. If you just weaken them and you don't cut the head off the snake, what's the point? Because
they can continue to target the top Hezbollah commanders. They're going to continue to target them. So it's kind of what they're doing is they're continuously cutting the head off the snake. But then this particular snake is regenerating. It's growing a new head back. And then they'll take them out. But the real head of the snake, let's face it, it's not Hezbollah, it's not Hamas, it's not Islamic Jihad. The head of the snake is in Tehran.
Right. Clark, is all of this Middle East unrest with where we're close to an all-out, holy moly, war on our hands and on her watch? Is this going to affect the election day? Or is it just one thing that Americans aren't focusing on?
Well, I think as these two more knowledgeable than I gentlemen have explained, this is a very complex issue with a long history. And I think if we look at the polls, we will see that public support for Israel has long been strong, but was declining before the current administration. But there are some, not everybody remembers the history that we're, part of which we're talking about here. They don't even remember Beirut, let alone the 6-Day War and et cetera. But I think it's very interesting to listen to Graham and Dave speak, because a lot of what they're talking about with regard to Israel's horn locking with Hamas right now is linked to this election, because it has really a two-faced war. One is conventional, which we're talking about. The other is winning the hearts and minds. And for instance, as long as Hamas retains those hostages, public sentiment is pretty strongly behind Israel. The moment Hamas gave up those hostages, world public sentiment might tip even more against Israel. That would suggest that maybe Kamala Harris should be trying to work a deal to get the hostages out. But there's inaction. There's a paralysis by this administration. They're afraid of stirring up their very hostile, genocidal, pro-Palestinian base. The majority of Americans are looking for some kind of action. It seems like Israel and the world are waiting for the outcome of this election. Either Donald Trump will step to the fore and Israel will have its both conventional and ideological ally back at its side, or Kamala Harris will come forward and then we'll find out what was voted for. Because it's not clear. She says she supports Israel, but it's its right to defend itself. But without Israel, without America by its side, Israel is being cut off at the knees, it seems to me. So the two are very, very inextricably woven in this election. And I'm reminded of the hostages in Iran and Carter and Reagan.
John, I think too there are two things that play into this whole complex issue. One is Vice President Harris's insistence that a conclusion to this must end in a two-state solution. That's absurd. The two states are Israel and that's right. Nobody knows. So a two-state solution is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the other side of this is that the single stumbling block to a ceasefire in Hamas land in Gaza is Hamas. And what they want is the opportunity to restructure Hamas, to reconstitute Hamas, and that isn't going to happen as long as Israel has something to say about it, and they do.
Well, Andrew, let's go back to that worldview that Mr. Clark was explaining. You weren't alive yet, but some of us remember when Reagan won in 1980, all of a sudden there were hostages released from Iran. And that was something that showed the American people that there was strength there, and it showed the world there was strength there. So is the world waiting for us to do something? Or are they just waiting and, clutching their pearls, Andrew?
Okay, so I'll touch that in a moment. I just want to touch upon two other things quickly. Graham, he talked about Iran. I think it's worth pointing out that Iran recently sent the first fuel ship in Beirut since this conflict metastasized. Also, what Dave is talking about, I think when it comes to two-state solution, the Palestinians, they don't want a two-state solution because that means they would have to govern themselves and they would have to govern the whole mess and the whole situation, and then no longer will they be depicted as victims, and they'll get less donations and less financing from the international communities. I think that there will never be a two-state solution because they don't want it. Now, as to your question, if the world is waiting for the U.S. to do something, I don't think any politician in the United States is willing to do this, especially ahead of an election. The last thing people want is another major military conflict. The whole point of this whole America First and MAGA and Trump presidencies is to reduce the amount of America's footprint in these global conflicts. The polls show people don't want war. People don't want to expand conflicts. There's even polls showing people aren't as gung ho about foreign aid and giving all this money to these other countries. It's a huge base of the Trump Republicans who just want non-intervention and not giving money to America's allies or its enemies until you start focusing on domestic issues. So the world can wait as long as it's wants, but I don't think that the U.S., at least you hope that they're not going to start putting troops on the ground or start, bombing Hezbollah or bombing Hamas, bombing Lebanon, bombing Iran, because that's a good chance. Then you're going to ignite a larger war. Who the heck wants that in today's world when people can hardly put groceries on the table, keep the lights on, and send their kids to a good school?
But this is an intractable problem. This could be argued the other way around, that they want leadership to stop this conflict before it broadens into another OPEC. I mean, I think that cuts both ways, because what we see, all I'm really saying, because, by the way, I don't know that any party or politician right now can persuade Hamas, for instance, to release its hostages or maybe do much else. But what we see, I repeat, is a paralysis, a do nothing by this administration. Mm-hmm. And we know that Donald Trump, one way or the other, I think would take a strong stance. And I think the world knows that. So whether or not it's America's duty to resolve it, I think a flip side of what you're saying too, Andrew, about the two-state solution of the Palestinians is not only do they maybe not want to build a country rather than use all money for more bombs, as far as Hamas goes, but they don't want to acknowledge the right of Israel to exist. That's why, that's a big stumbling block. Maybe she should be pushing for that as well. And to link a two-state solution, which the world has spent 60 or 80 years failing to accomplish, to the release of the hostages or the resolution of the conflict there, only promises a greater conflagration in future. So once again, I just suggest that, maybe it's unavoidable that the U.S. has some toe in those horrible waters, and doing nothing is the absolute worst thing if we want to prevent an escalation. I just think some people might see it that way.
I think a key part of your answer, you said 80 years. This conflict is going on for 80 years. I'm sure longer than that if you go by biblical standards and other world history in that region. And the U.S. has been active there in that region for this entire time, and nothing has been resolved, and it never will be resolved, and no politician is going to put forth a solution. Even if you have a two-state solution, that's still not going to end the misery and the suffering and the conflict that occurs in the region. Now, perhaps I'm wrong. Dave is privy to the intelligence of what goes on in the region. He's leading these coups, so I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't see how it's ever going to be resolved, whether the U.S. is involved or not. You're better off than just focusing on your challenges at home and restoring stronger purchasing power for the American people, as opposed to engaging in foreign adventurism.
I think it's important to remember that prior to Biden, we did have the Abraham Accord, which was a major step in bringing Arab nations and Israel together with common cause. That hasn't happened very often in the history of Israel and its neighbors. And I think that's an important aspect, because it shows you that if you get rid of the troublemakers, there is an opportunity to do something substantive in the Middle East, and it hadn't been done before.
Israel may not reduce the pressure on the terrorist group until it's no longer a threat. And if that happens between now and the election, something on November 6th, the day after the election, is bound to pop up. Thanks, panel. We are back to have a little bit of fun with the panel of curmudgeons in comics. Play along, as the adage goes. If you can't beat them, join them. It's the C5 Game of Trivia, brought to you by Liberty Nation News' own Kirsten Brooker. And Andrew Moran is on the game board to walk us through this most difficult segment.
Christy booking, boo! Anyway, so welcome everyone to the hottest game show on the World Wide Web. There is no debate about this. I think that, to be very honest with you, I do believe that we have rightly believed, but we certainly believe that certain issues are just settled. Certain issues are just settled. And that's why I do believe we are living, sadly, in real unsettled times, whereby the Conservative 5 Just for Fun is the greatest game show on the internet. Greatest. Now, somebody
give Andrew a pager. Quick.
Now, on to the really big show, and I will depend on Mr. Claronomics to keep score for everyone at home. So, question number 1. As part of Donald Trump's anti-tax platform, he announced on September 12th that he would work to eliminate taxes on property ownership, overtime pay, and food and beverages.
Overtime, one for me. The only one I'll get.
But I like Graham's idea where we say the question, provide the answers, and then someone picks the answer. I like Graham's gentleman approach. So anyway, question number 2. John is leading so far. He's 1 on the board. Question number 2. A month ago, Google went to court. Hey, I wrote this article. Google went to court over an alleged monopoly of web search space and was found guilty. Now, Google must return to court to fight the same fight, but this time regarding disinformation, the dark web, or their advertisement strategies. And for this, I will go to find
disinformation.
C. Advertising strategy.
Yes, that is correct. Dave and John, 1 apiece.
Gosh, me and Graham just sitting here.
It's you and me, Mr. Hammer.
Sad, pathetic. Can
I'm
Graham
the
and I
handle.
be a team? Because
You're the
together
hammer.
we're probably pretty good.
Oh, and then between, Dave, you get them. Go ahead.
I live for Andrew's articles.
No, well, our audience obviously lives for Kirsten Brooker's trivia article. I think
apparently it does.
Never me. Never the economics man. So question number 3. What is celebrated from September 15th to October 15th? Is it African Americans, Hispanics, or the 2S LGBTQIAP plus community?
B, Hispanics.
Yay.
So Don has, Mr. Dave has 2. Okay, I love this question. Kirsten did not write this, but I will. This is my question. Graham's gonna know this one. I know for sure. My bet is on Graham. You're gonna get this. What central bank recently cut the amount of cash banks need to have on hand by 50 basis points, effectively injecting tens of billions of dollars in the economy? And for this, I'm going to go actually to Sarah for this question. She's good. Is it the Federal Reserve, the Bank of Canada, or the People's Bank of China?
Federal Reserve.
The People Bank of China.
I was right. Graham got it. Yeah, go Graham.
I thought that was Sarah's question.
I was going to answer.
Canada would never do such a thing.
Oh, Canada.
So I knew it had to be China, but didn't you set Sarah up to answer the question and then?
You did, and then I got cut out.
I'm sorry, Sarah. It's anarchy here today.
It is. It's just crazy.
Society. It's anarchy.
I'm trying to moderate, but I can just keep score. Dave's ahead.
That's all. That was a Seinfeld reference, by the way.
I got it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so I believe it is question number 5. John, you should correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's correct. You're on 5.
All right, so not only are electric vehicles more expensive to purchase and repair, they're also 20%. Hey, I also wrote this article. They're also 20% more costly to ship, tow, or insure.
Insure.
That is correct. Dave has 3 on the board.
And the reason
I'll never own one.
Is the reason I know that is because not only did I read your article, but a neighbor was bitching and moaning about how his insurance went up, not 20%, but 40% when he got this stinking thing that he can't keep charged.
Off of the immediate subject of electric vehicles, but onto the subject of better performances in the C5 quizzes. You have a background in political campaign stuff, so you probably do know Donna Brazile. Why don't you get her to give you the answers in advance?
Maybe. I can also read upside down, and I'm pretty crafty, little political operative that I was. However, that's cheating. I don't cheat. You guys do. Heck, Andrew cheats all the time, but nope. Dave cheats by reading every article on the site, so there you go. But I'll think about it.
Well, I was going to go talk about motor vehicle insurance, CPAR, but nobody seems to care. So I'm just going to move on then to question number, I believe it is question number 6. Who did Chris Cuomo criticize on his show Cuomo for their responses, or lack thereof, to the second assassination attempt against Trump? Did he criticize NBC and Fox News, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, or Trump's security team?
B. It was B. He criticized the president and his mate.
That is correct.
President and his mate?
That is correct.
Yeah,
so, John, how are we doing on the scoreboard?
VP Harris.
I think we all know that Mr. Hammer has cracked the anvil and is the far above leader. There's no need to ask any more questions, even.
Well, I've been told to cheat, so I'm going to cheat next time.
I have 3 more questions here. We're going to move on here. Okay, so what organization opted to not endorse any presidential candidate?
Teamsters.
Yes.
There you go. Well done. Well done, Sarah. Well done for shouting.
Thank you. I'm on the board.
Sarah's on the board.
I'm number 1.
I have a feeling everyone knew the answer to that question, so good for you for shouting out.
I had to.
Next question, second to last question here. How many migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela does the Biden administration's humanitarian parole program permit into the country each month? Is it up to 10,000, up to 20,000, or up to 30,000?
30,000.
Goodness gracious. Can't we just mic Dave? I don't want to hear Dave anymore. I don't want to hear him get all the answers right all the time. I just want to...
I just couldn't believe that when I heard that. I thought, this can't be right.
Can't be right.
This can't be right.
It's a stunning number. It's a stunning number. I'm surprised there's anyone left in Cuba.
So this is the last question. You will know the answer if you listen to me during one of our C5 segments, but I got completely ignored. So let's see if you guys know this. Who said this? Quote, Mars is essentially in the same orbit. Mars is somewhat the same distance from the sun, which is very important. We have seen pictures where there are canals, we believe, and water. If there is water,
salad server?
if there is water, It means there's oxygen. If there's oxygen, that means we can breathe. Who said this? Was it?
Kamala Harris, probably.
No, it sounds like the salad girl.
All right. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, or Dan Quayle?
Oh, it was.
I'm going to say Dan Quayle.
Yeah, it was Dan Quayle. It was Dan Quayle. But that was just before he said, and for those of you who can't spell tomato,
It was potato.
It was
yeah,
potato.
tomato, potato, you know.
You
We're
say
shark
tomato, I
jumping.
say tomato. You say potato, I say potato.
Okay, I
Tomato,
think
tomato,
whatever
we are over.
you guys
and
drank for
over
breakfast.
to Miss Sarah Cowgill.
Is that the Satchmo?
All right, who won?
Yeah,
Who
I
won?
think that
We
was
gotta
like
wrap this
audio,
up.
audio blackface. I would say that we all know who won. since
Decisively,
actually
Dave. Scary
got
Dave.
more points than all the rest of us combined.
But we
Because
all
even
know,
Andrew.
we all know the real winners though were viewers who got to see beautiful Sarah Cowgill.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay,
right.
that's my signal to get out of this mess that I have created. A circle of hell I created, and I'm walking away. So thanks, folks. We hope you ended on a high note after a weird show. Hopefully you at least had some fun, and thanks for playing again. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform. YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble, we're on them all. As well, Liberty Nation News has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. Now, Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement. I'm your host, Sarah Cowgill. Thanks for joining us today for Free Thinking, Free Speech, LibertyNation.com.